doing very well. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so Miss Kulbida, with this past election, what was it like coming into work, not really sure what you were going to be reporting that day?
Well, that's sort of what it's like every day. You don't know
Yeah.
what the news is going to be until you get here and you see what's happening.
Mhm.
But that day, I was heading down to New York City to cover the election from Hillary Clinton's campaign headquarters, and my colleague John Gray was heading down to cover the election from Donald Trump's election headquarters. We were both in New York City, probably about a mile, 20 blocks or so apart, but had very different outcomes that night. It was exciting to be a part of history that night.
Now, what was the atmosphere like at the Hillary Clinton venue that evening?
Well, early in the evening, it was very positive. Everybody had been reading through the polls that had Hillary ahead in the states where they thought she needed to win. And as the results started coming in, as the polls were closing and the state numbers were coming in, it was pretty positive from my vantage point, looking out into the floor and hearing the speakers. There was a lot of energy, a lot of excitement. But then that started getting a little quieter. I think the last hurrah was around 11 o'clock when they called a couple of states for Hillary Clinton, and she pulled ahead in the Electoral College count at that point of Donald Trump. And then right after that, it got very quiet. No one was coming out onto the stage anymore. Our newscast ended at 11:35, and we're trying to figure out what I'm going to be doing next. And my news director is asking, so when's she coming out? And I said, she's not even in the building. She was still at a Midtown Manhattan hotel, and they were still waiting for more numbers to come in. And as those numbers were being delayed, it was becoming clear that she was not going to come out on the stage that night. So it was not something that I had expected, or I think anybody in the room even had expected, that they wouldn't hear from her that night. And it wasn't until the next day that she gave that concession speech.
Now, a few months ago, I had your colleague on, John Gray, and I asked this question. Now, this might be a very different response. A few months ago, we had no idea who the president of the United States, for the 45th president, was going to be. But I asked him, one word to describe this election year, what would it be?
Wow, one word to describe this election year. I start thinking about the various debates we've had where there were so many personal attacks among the candidates, and it was not a pretty election year. I kept thinking that, people would focus more on policies and other things, but it just took a long time to get to that point. I think it was a very different election year. It was nothing like I had ever seen in my life, and I don't know if we're ever going to see something like this again. It was definitely different. Then it was interesting to be a part of it in reporting that, because what seemed to be also different was no matter what we were reporting, a lot of people, when they made up their minds, no matter what information they were getting, they were only taking in what would then cement their position, and then they would put away the information that might have changed their minds. People seem to, when they pick their candidate, there seemed to be very little to dissuade them from staying with that candidate, whether it was on the Democratic side or on the Republican side.
Now, I have to ask you, how exactly did you get into this career of journalism, and what made you want to get into this career?
Well, it was something we were always interested in my family, in the news. I had multiple newspapers in the house during the week. I grew up in New York City in the Bronx, and we read the Daily News and the Post during the week. And then on the weekends, we'd always get the Sunday New York Times. And I even remember walking with my mother to the newspaper stand on a late Saturday night to be able to get it and get the newspaper and start reading it early. And we always watched the news together as well, the local news and the evening national news. And my parents are immigrants from Ukraine. I'm first generation born here. And there was not a lot of news coming from Ukraine at that time in the international news. There were no cable stations at that time because Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union at that point. And I always thought it would be fascinating to grow up to be a reporter and be a foreign correspondent and be able to bring stories to people that weren't being told. When I got to high school, instead of being a newspaper reporter, I worked for my high school paper. I started getting interested in broadcasting because we started a TV club when I was in high school.
Oh, wow.
And we all took turns being a writer, a director, a producer, a reporter, and an anchor. And I realized when I was writing a story and somebody else was reading the story that I had written, I never thought that they had read it as well as I had written it. You know, when you're young, you think you're the best at things. So I thought, okay, if I'm going to be a reporter, then I have to be not just a writer. I need to be the one to present the story as well. And that's how I got into wanting to be in broadcast journalism, not just journalism, and studied that at NYU. And continued on to my career from there.
Now, I have to ask you, I know in this business, you switch jobs a lot and everything. So I want to ask you, without getting into any details, but what's the hardest part to switch a job in this industry?
Well, what's hard, I haven't had the worst when it comes to this industry. Is you know, in the beginning of your career, you can be a nomad and you can end up crisscrossing the country for a better job, a better position, better hours. You know, something that gets you off overnights or early mornings, to days and night side, to a newscast that's more watched. I'm lucky in that all of my travels have been in the Northeast. My first on-air job was actually in the North Country when TV8 was broadcasting out of Glens Falls. From there, I moved to Buffalo, from Buffalo to Springfield, Massachusetts, and then here to the Capital Region. And I say I'm lucky because my family's here in the Northeast and my husband's family in the Northeast. So we were never more than a long drive from them. We never had to fly across the country to see family because family's very important to both of us, and that was good for me. What's hard is your newsroom family becomes like your second family, and it's hard to leave when you need to go on to that next position. Now Facebook makes it a lot easier to stay in touch with everybody, and I've reconnected with people from early on in my career, so it's okay to keep tabs on your second family now on social media.
Now I have to ask you, what is it like working with everyone at Channel 10?
Oh, it's great. What's funny is that John Gray and I both worked together at another station when I first came to Albany. He left and went to Fox 23, and then I came to Channel 10, and then next thing you know, between an agreement between the owners of the stations, you know, there was a shared services agreement, and the newsrooms worked together, and now I'm working back with John again. So that's one piece of advice for you and anyone wanting to go into journalism. Never burn your bridges, because you never know who you're going to be working with in this business again. It's small, and people run into each other a lot.
Now, Lydia, the last question here before we wrap up this interview, I want to ask you, with President-elect Donald Trump taking office on January 20th, do we really know exactly how this will affect us here in New York State?
No, I think that's still being played out. We know that he is a New Yorker, and anyone on the political spectrum is hoping that, you know, he will work on issues that will be important, not just to all the country, but to New Yorkers, and help the state out. But will there also be politics at play, because he's a Republican and the governor here is a Democrat who may have said some not nice things about him during the campaign? We'll have to wait and see how that plays out.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, Ms. Kulbida, I want to say thank you for joining me on today's Sports Fusion News episode, and hope to have you on again in the future.
All right, and good luck in your career. Hope to see you on ESPN someday.
Thank you. Okay, Fuse Nation, thank you for tuning in for this Sports Fusion News episode. Please go back, watch all my other episodes, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. I'll be back here tomorrow at 3 p.m. with Roger Weiland, host of Big Board Sports on 104.5 The Team, ESPN Radio, and also tomorrow night, with the host of Levac and Gaz, Tom Gozlowski. What does he have to say about the whole sports world as well? Be sure to tune in tomorrow. I will see you then. Thank you for watching.